Pro-life push. We preview a vote in the Senate on a bill that would ban abortions at 20 weeks. Global audience. President Trump touts America as the place to do business at the Davos Economic Summit. Keeping children safe. A member of the Vatican's Commission on Protecting Minors gives us an update on the group's work. And School Choice 101. We take a look at how having more options for families could impact Catholic education. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, January 26, 2018. Good evening and thanks for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Tonight, pro-life groups are urging pro-life Americans to make their voices heard. A bill that would ban abortions after 20 weeks faces a tough vote next week, and advocates say now is the time to ask lawmakers to back it. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi breaks down the numbers for us. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. The bill needs 60 votes to pass, with most Republicans voting for the pro-life bill. That still means about 10 Democrats will have to get on board. Now, some of the key senators are up for re-election, and their stance on this bill could sway voters. Senator Heidi Heitkamp, a Democrat from North Dakota, faces a tough re-election this fall. President Trump won 64% of her state's votes. I know in North Dakota they already have that ban on the books. Is that something that, I know you didn't support it last time. Where are you falling this time around?
We're taking a look at it.
Okay. Senator Heitkamp voted against the 20-week abortion ban in 2015. The bill failed to get the needed 60 votes.
On this vote, the yeas are 54 and the nays are 42.
Wisconsin and Ohio also ban most abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy. 3 senators from those states, all Democrats, are up for re-election. All 3 voted against the 2015 Senate bill. But 3 Democrats also up for re-election voted yes. Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, and Joe Donnelly of Indiana. Those states all passed 20-week bans. Pennsylvania's governor vetoed his state's bill. Senator Lindsey Graham, who's sponsoring the ban, tells me the tide is turning in America.
We're one of 7 nations in the world that allow abortion on demand at 20 weeks. That's the 5th month of the pregnancy. 20 states that passed a version of this, so I think a lot of pro-choice people could be for this because you're talking about the 5th month.
You only got 54 votes last time.
I hope we do better.
Now, several pro-life leaders tell me they're going to be using Monday's vote as well as the life issue in general as a key issue in this year's midterm elections. The new Knights of Columbus Marist poll finds 63% of voters support banning abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy. But in 2016, the economy, not abortion, was the issue most voters said was most important when they voted. Wyatt?
Jason, if the 20-week ban actually passes, would it then survive a legal challenge?
Laws in 21 states ban abortion after 20 weeks. But courts shot down 2 of those, in Idaho and in Arizona. Now, Supreme Court precedent does allow states to restrict abortions once the unborn baby is viable.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. Next week, the House of Representatives will take up a bill to protect Olympic athletes from sexual abuse. It comes just days after former USA gymnastics team doctor Larry Nassar was sentenced to up to 175 years in prison for sexual abuse. Among other measures, the Protecting Young Victims from Sexual Abuse Act would require child abuse among professional athletes to be reported to authorities. Both the House and Senate passed a similar measure in May. The House is revisiting the measure due to changes in the original language. The White House announces a plan to allow 1.8 million illegal immigrants to become citizens. In exchange, President Trump wants $25 billion to build his border wall. The news comes as President Trump wraps up his visit to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump's immigration proposal would help DACA recipients, the dreamers who were illegally brought here to America as children. But the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops still has concerns. They tell me it doesn't do enough to help families.
We believe the family is the building block of our nation, of our communities, so that's particularly concerning.
The executive director of Migration and Refugee Services at the USCCB says Catholic bishops support a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, but the White House proposal doesn't guarantee them proper protection.
We are concerned about DACA and Dreamers' families also, parents, other children here. It's not clear that they're included in such a proposal.
Bill Canny says U.S. bishops agree with the White House. There shouldn't be open borders and security is vital, but not at the expense of the Dreamers.
America is a cutting-edge economy, but our immigration system is stuck in the past.
President Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, pushes for immigration reform, but his main focus today is making U.S. trade more fair. He says America first doesn't mean America alone.
As President of the United States, I will always protect the interests of our country, our companies, and our workers.
Trump's pitch to world leaders, America is the place to do business.
When the United States grows, so does the world.
A U.S. president hasn't attended the World Economic Forum in Davos where Trump spoke in nearly 20 years. Now he prepares to give a speech that is familiar to all presidents, his State of the Union address. That's on Tuesday. Wyatt?
And Mark will be covering that speech as well. What is he going to hit on likely in that speech?
Well, you can expect him to speak about his accomplishments from his first year in office. And this past week at the White House, President Trump said he wants to invest $1 trillion to rebuild what he calls a crumbling infrastructure system. It's one of his legislative priorities this year. He may try and sell it on Tuesday.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. Also at the Davos today, President Trump denied reports that he tried to fire the man in charge of the Russia probe.
Fake news, folks. Fake news.
What's your message?
Typical New York Times fake stories.
Special counsel Robert Mueller is investigating if the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to influence the presidential election. The New York Times says Trump wanted to fire Mueller last June, but backed down after White House lawyer Don McGahn threatened to resign. Trump has also denied any collusion with Russia. Cecile Richards confirms reports that she's stepping down from Planned Parenthood, the country's largest abortion provider.
Today, I'm announcing that I will be stepping down from my position as president of Planned Parenthood this year.
Richards has been president of Planned Parenthood for the past 12 years. During her tenure, the organization increased the number of abortions performed each year by more than 10%. In their 2016-2017 report, Planned Parenthood reported performing more than 320,000 abortions. Hundreds of supporters of the militant group Hamas protest President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The demonstration in the Gaza Strip comes after Palestinian leaders refused to meet Vice President Mike Pence during his Middle East visit. Tensions are high again after the White House threatened to withhold aid money until Palestinian leaders return peace talks with Israel. At least 37 are dead and more than 100 are injured after a fire races through a South Korean hospital without a sprinkler system. Most of the victims were on the first and second floors of the 6-story building. It's the country's deadliest blaze in about a decade. Paris is bracing for floods as the Seine River approaches peak levels following heavy rainfall. The river is expected to reach 20 feet this weekend. Authorities closed several tunnels, parks, and the bottom floor of the Louvre Museum. Dozens of residents have also evacuated. Outside Paris, heavy rain has caused power outages and forced about 400 evacuations. The president of Indonesia opens a conference of nearly 4,000 Catholic college students by asking them to make peace when conflicts arise. According to the CIA fact book, the country is nearly 90% Muslim. Only around 3% of Indonesians are Catholic. Pope Francis meets the Haitian president, Jovenel Moïse, at the Vatican. The leaders discussed helping the young and the poor in Haiti and also how to curb the growing number of citizens fleeing the country. Thousands of young Haitians have left for the United States, Chile, Brazil, and the Bahamas. The Vatican's upcoming conference on families in Ireland will feature a seminar on child protection after the church's sex abuse scandal devastated the credibility of the Catholic Church in the country. Survivors are expected to participate. We're joined from Rome by Father Hans Zollner, head of the Center for Child Protection and a member of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Father Hans, 2 abuse survivors who served with you on the commission have now left. Will the new commission include more survivors? And can you give us an update on your work?
Now, the membership of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors will be decided or will be announced shortly, I believe, over the next, I don't know, couple of weeks or so, or a bit longer. We will work at the Center for Child Protection, has always continued, so we work in the area of safeguarding of minors. We provide e-learning education and a diploma course, and from October on also a master's course in safeguarding, the first of its kind worldwide. I have just come back from the Czech Republic, where I have addressed the whole bishops' conference and all religious provincials of congregations and orders, as well as all the rectors, formators, and the vocation promoters, in a country that 2 years ago would not have offered that opportunity.
I want to switch gears here. Last week on his trip to Chile and Peru, the Holy Father came under fire for defending a bishop who's accused of covering up for a Chilean priest who was sanctioned by the Vatican in 2011 for abusing minors. But the Pope also begged survivors for forgiveness. How much input do you get from victims of clergy abuse?
Now, I personally am in contact with a number of survivors and victims from a variety of countries, from a variety of backgrounds, from a variety of languages. I'm in constant contact with them, and I have heard many times over the last days that they have been very much hurt and disappointed about the Pope's remarks. But they were heartened by his apology that he offered on the flight back from Lima. Still, it is an ongoing hurt, it is an ongoing discussion.
Now, Father, you are a psychologist and a theologian at the Gregorian University, where you're in charge of the Center for Child Protection. Can you describe the work you do there to make sure children are safe in the church?
We try to find a way so that the learning comes from the head to the heart and then translate into behavior that is creating safe space and safe opportunities for young people to grow up in today's world. This concerns the real world, and this concerns the virtual world. We have organized in October last year an international congress on child dignity in the digital world, and I'm afraid until now this has not really been an issue, neither in the church nor in society at large, that was really spoken about much, or at least there have not been really measures to stop abuse online. Now, this is only one example where we try to work together with researchers, with politicians, with law enforcement outside the church, and we want to help so that this world is a safer place for children.
Well, it's such important work that you do on both the Commission and the Gregorian University. Father Hans Zollner, head of the Center for Child Protection and a member of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, what's the deal? We discuss the Trump administration's plan to help 2 million dreamer immigrants.
Nasce la domanda del perché e lì si trasmette la fede, perché ha fede.
Pope Francis says we need courage and truth to express our faith to others. At his daily Mass in Rome, the Holy Father says the faithful cannot be lukewarm when talking about Christ. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. President Trump's new immigration plan calls for much tougher restrictions on legal immigration.
We must replace our current system of extended family chain migration with a merit-based system of admissions that selects new arrivals based on their ability to contribute to our economy, to support themselves financially, and to strengthen our country.
Joining us to discuss what happens next is Anna Giratelli, a reporter for the Washington Examiner. Anna, thanks so much for being with us. Are the president's proposed changes to legal immigration too restrictive for Congress? Are they realistic?
No, these are all things that the president and his staff have already discussed with Chuck Schumer, with Paul Ryan, with Mitch McConnell, and it's 4 components. They want $25 billion for border security. They want to give the DACA Dreamers, up to 2 million people this time, a pathway to citizenship, and then rein in chain migration and do away with the visa lottery system. But it's all things that Republicans and Democrats have known he wants to do this. It's no surprise.
But among both groups, some of these are contentious topics. I mean, you mentioned the DACA Dreamers, and that's a situation where some have been willing to compromise on that issue. And for the Democrat side, they say, you mentioned border security, willing to fund the wall. Do you think that's realistic? I mean, Democrats have been so concerned about the wall.
Yeah. Well, and I think when they're in a position where they need to make a bargain, they're going to make that extra. Like Luis Gutierrez from Illinois, he's a very strong Democrat. He said, listen, we'll give you the wall, but we need you to take care of Dreamers. And then we have this new continuing resolution through February 8th. The problem is Democrats are going to say whatever they need to if they need to. So I think the best time for Republicans in the White House to strike while it's hot is leading up the next 13 days to February 8th when government funding runs out. Democrats are going to become more desperate and they might be willing to bargain. And keep in mind, if Trump gets 1, 2, or 3 parts of his 4-part framework, I mean, that's a win for Republicans.
And that's why I wanted to switch around and ask you a little bit more about that, because the Republicans have been a little bit more cautious on the Dreamer situation, DACA Dreamers. So do you think, even though the president may back it, do you think he'll get enough GOP support?
I think he will, because the president has been very forthcoming on it, saying, listen, this isn't like a normal illegal immigrant who may have crossed over the border. These are people who were brought here illegally. He's not talking about what are we going to do with their parents and their relatives. That is part of what he wants to do with family chain migration. So you can't have a DACA recipient then say, 10 of my family members are going to come over through me now. But I think in the Senate, you have David Perdue of Georgia and Tom Cotton of Arkansas, and they're really lobbying on behalf of the White House in the Senate, saying we need to get support. They've got McConnell on board. They've got a bill ready. So I think they're paving the way for the White House to get those Republicans on board. And of course, people like Steve King are really unhappy with it. It's not going to happen. They're not going to come on board. But I think you do have a pathway to enough votes.
Okay, let's look ahead here real quick, because next Tuesday we have the State of the Union. What kind of reception do you think President Trump will get from Congress, noting all of this?
Yeah, as well, compared to last year, now that we have 2 to kind of look at, I think it's going to be a little more harsh. You've already had some Democrats saying, I'm not going to show up. You've had others saying they're going to wear black in honor of the Me Too movement. It gets tricky because President Trump has been accused in the past of sexual harassment and assault. You have the new Stormy Daniels payoff. Melania Trump, First Lady, did not go to Davos, Switzerland with the president this week. Instead, she secretly flew to Florida. So all these things coming out. So if Democrats want to make a statement about the Me Too movement, it kind of does involve Trump in these ways. So I think if he stays around the issue and focuses on the economy and all the good changes you've seen, that's his best way forward in the State of the Union.
Okay, we'll be watching the State of the Union and the issue of immigration as well. And Girardelli, a reporter for the Washington Examiner, thanks so much for your analysis.
Thanks so much.
The former Archbishop of Indianapolis has died. Daniel B. Kline led the Archdiocese for 19 years. He served 5 years before that as the Bishop of Memphis, Tennessee. A stroke forced him to retire in 2011. Current Indy Archbishop Charles Thompson calls B. Kline a great mentor and dear friend. He was 79 years old. Up next, classroom questions, school choice, and how it affects Catholic education. President Trump proclaims this week as National School Choice Week. In a statement, he writes, during National School Choice Week, I encourage parents to explore innovative educational alternatives, and I challenge students to dream big and work hard for the futures they deserve. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Catholic school students are joining in the celebration. Earlier this week, Lauren interviewed a leading school choice advocate who explains how choice helps students who are most in need.
Joining us now is Jeannie Allen, founder and CEO for the Center for Education Reform, an advocacy group for school choice. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Lauren.
Define school choice for us.
The opportunity for parents to take the tax dollars allotted for their education and take those dollars to any school that they think best meets the needs of their kids, public, private, virtual, online, wherever.
Critics say it takes money, needed money, away from public schools, and public schools then are underserved and education in our country goes downhill.
The reality is the money that's allocated for for education is for our kids. It's not for a system. The system has failed for years to deliver the education to the vast majority of kids that they need and deserve to be productive, fulfill their life and God-given potential, and help them fulfill the American dream. What we've seen school choice do is allow parents, particularly those with least power, those minorities and low income especially, and working class as well, actually for the first time in their lives, get an education that is helping them to be great.
Education Secretary Betsy DeVos is a big supporter of this. Has this helped the school choice cause?
It's absolutely helped having somebody in Washington who is supportive and promotes and respects the fact that this enormous grassroots uprising of parents, policymakers, and advocates across the country for the last 30 years has wanted to make a change in the way education is delivered. You know, in a country where more than 65% of our kids are not proficient in math, reading, science,
all across
literacy,
the board?
all across the board. And that number, so 35% proficiency rate, drops to below 20% for poor and minority communities. I mean, we have a crisis that has only been mitigated by the advent of things like the opportunity to send your kids to a private school of choice, charter schools. And those programs have then in turn, Lauren, broken up these monopolies that we see and given more power to traditional teachers at rank and file schools.
Jeannie Allen, founder and CEO of the Center for Education Reform, which means that you are fighting a big behemoth, the Department of Education. Have you found that you are up against too big of a mountain to push?
Well, the mountain, the boulder that we've pushed up the mountain for the last 25 to 30 years has actually gone much faster and quicker than most people would have imagined. I mean, the reality is it's an enormous obstacle. The other obstacle is apathy and lack of information. A lot of people just don't know that they should be asking and demanding power. And so schools do, a lot of schools, public, private, charter, do great. But the reality is it's not for us, the public and the government, to decide what best meets the needs of our kids. It should be for parents to decide. And when you give parents power, they not only become more informed and more engaged in their child's education, their kids succeed.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeannie Allen, founder and CEO of the Center for Education Reform.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Lauren Ashburn for that interview. Catholic leaders in Canada are among nearly 90 religious officials asking the government to accommodate diversity of values and beliefs. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has not backed down from requiring organizations to pledge respect for, quote, abortion rights to receive funding to create summer jobs for youth. For more on the situation in Canada, plus a story on how the new U.S. Ambassador for International Religious Freedom, visit CatholicNewsAgency.com. Pope Francis presides at evening prayers for the Feast of the Conversion of St. Paul yesterday. The Holy Father visited the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls to wrap up the week of prayer for Christian unity. Pope Francis told members of several Christian communities that the grace of baptism is what connects them. The motto of this year's annual celebration, "Powerful is your hand, Lord." And finally, a resident in the Gaza Strip finds an ancient burial ground in his backyard. The man says he found 9 burial holes with bones after heavy rains unearthed parts of the chamber. Archaeologists believe the site is about 2,000 years old when the territory was part of the Roman Empire. Gaza is now controlled by the Islamic militant group Hamas. The area is packed with ancient archaeology, some still waiting to be unearthed. And that wraps up our newscast for tonight and for this week. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you so much for watching. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.